Let me ask you a question about, and now we're about 6 months past when this happened, and you did your show on MMAfighting.com, the MMA Hour, I should say, where you talked about everything that went down and being banned by the UFC and some of the issues that happened regarding Fox dismissing you. The one big piece of criticism I think you felt, no, how did I phrase this? The one big or major outlet that really criticized you was Deadspin, and that piece, if I remember correctly, was probably seen by, 250,000 people, or at least 250,000 views. I'm gonna have it up here, and it's blackballed MMA reporter admits he was UFC's paid shill, and it's written by Kevin Draper. And the big charge here is that when you were talking about this stuff, the biggest of these, this is quoting this, was admitting that his checks for appearing on Fox, both the pre and post fight shows, checks which have since been cut off after Fox fired him, he says, at the UFC's behest, were signed by Zuffa, UFC's parent company. So they really took you to task because they were saying that you were essentially bought and paid for by the UFC to go on these shows, and then they were criticizing you because you were, in their opinion, proclaiming to be an independent journalist, yet taking money from the place that you were talking about. One, how did you see that criticism from them? And two, 6 months after the fact, how do you view what went down with Fox?
So on the surface, what they are reporting is factual because I said it, and they reported what I said, rather accurately. I wasn't surprised that, after that show, of all the outlets that covered this story, the only ones that focused on this part of the story were Deadspin because, for whatever reason, they've always taken shots at me, calling me names, making fun of me. I don't know the reason for this, and it was interesting. The morning of that show, I got an email from someone at Deadspin, a very nice and gentle email saying how supportive they were of me and wanted me to talk to them, and it would be so great to talk and all this stuff. And, a few hours later, when I lay all my cards on the table, they kind of go with that angle. That did not surprise me given how they had, covered me, I guess, or talked about me in the past. To me, going with that angle is fine. You can do whatever you want. It's really taking what I said on the surface level. I thought I explained the situation very clearly. And, again, if I had the opportunity to do again, I'm obviously not so sure that I would do it because I understood, I understand now the same way I understand back then how big of an issue this was. In short, the issue was that when Fox hired me, well, let me just go back to August of 2011 quickly. UFC announces that they've signed a deal with Fox that will kick in November of 2011 and officially January of 2012. I met with George Greenberg of Fox that day. I flew to LA to cover the announcement, and we met outside the Fox lot, and he sat down with me and said, we're looking for reporters, this and that. He was just kind of, I guess, interviewing me, filling me out. And he said that, one big thing that's really important to us is journalism. We're not going to cover the UFC like, some sort of fluff outlet where we're going to treat them, fairly, cover them accurately. If something happens controversially, we will cover that as well. And to me, that was like unbelievable because I was wondering in our sport, Spike previously had the rights to the UFC and they didn't really do any journalism as far as the UFC is concerned. So I was curious how Fox is obviously a bigger news outlet and has a history of covering, their sports organizations that they have rights to. I was curious how they would handle it. So I thought that was great. Then when I got the job, I was excited to do it. I was going to be on the show called UFC Tonight. I'd be their insider, sort of like their Jay Glazer. But then I was told, we're also, going to do pre and post fight shows, which were new. They've never done that before on Spike. So this was a new thing. Weigh-in shows as well. This is all new. This never happened before. We want you to be the backstage reporter. Awesome. And so how they explained it to me was, the UFC Tonight show on Wednesdays, it originally actually was on Tuesdays, eventually on Wednesday. That's a moot point. But anyhow, they said, those are Fox shows. And we produce them. We have all the say, UFC has nothing to do with it. You'll get paid from us. But because we pay the UFC for the event coverage, part of what we pay them for is so that they can produce pre-fight show, post-fight show, weigh-in show. Different production crew than the ones who produce the actual event, but, we're paying them and then they kind of just take it off our plate. And this was such, I can't tell you how much I struggled with this and how many people I talked to, mentors, guys like Aaron Cohen, greatest, TV writer to me in the history of TV. I mean, Bob Costas' guy. I mean, people, I worked at HBO, people who I used to work with at HBO. I talked to so many people, Jay Glazer himself, talked to people at Fox. How can I do this? My first lesson, my first class at Syracuse at Newhouse was journalism ethics. When I broke the story that Dana White was buying Strikeforce, Zuffa was buying Strikeforce, after the interview was over, he had a bag of UFC gear in his office, and he said, "Hey, take this home to your family." And I said, "No." And he was so insulted. I said, "I can't do that. I can't take anything over $30. There's no way. This goes against everything." And so I said that to his face. But here I am as a mid-20-year-old, and I'm being told there's only one TV job out there. This is the job that you've been dreaming about. This is, the Howard Cosell job that you want. This is going to lead to more things. This is the Fox Mike flag. This is what, the kid from Montreal has always strived for. And so I wrestled, do you turn it down because of what you were taught, or do you kind of, come to terms with the fact that at the end of the day, this money is coming from Fox and going to Zuffa, and then it's coming to me, which I hated. Eventually, obviously, I said yes, and I was very, very mad at myself and disappointed, but I took those. I mean, I had to. This is the job that I wanted. I tried to be as fair and unbiased and independent as possible. And, I even was asked many times by UFC employees, "Hey, do you want to do something for UFC.com? Do you want to do something for Fight Pass?" I always said no, and you can ask them. And the reason I said no was, to me, I'm working for Fox. I have the Mike flag. Yes, I am at odds with what, this whole arrangement is, but I can kind of break it down that if the money is originally coming from Fox, then okay, that's okay, I guess, in my twisted way. But I'm not going to do anything specific for the UFC. That goes against everything I believe in. And, witness the fact that I lost my job 3 times. I eventually lost it in March of last year, always because they didn't like how I was covering the sport. They didn't like the questions. They thought, I was prying, I was poking the bear too much. I really tried to kind of ignore the fact where this money was coming from in the end and tried to focus on where it was originally coming from, if you get what I'm saying. Is that something that I'm, going to tell other people to do? Is that something, that I'm, proud of, if you will? No, I wish it wasn't the case. And I asked the Fox executives many times, can't you just pay me like you paid Jay Glazer? Like, Jay Glazer is a Fox employee. Can't you just pay me that way? What's the difference? Can't you just add? I wasn't even getting paid that much. I mean, it was so not worth it, Richard, for the amount of money, how much they underpaid us. Can't you just do that? Just add it to what I was getting from UFC Tonight. But, this is how the budget is, and we pay them for these shows, and then they'll pay you guys. And, it was just one of those things. And it was a 1-year contract. And every year for 4+ years, I asked them, can we change it? Can we change it? And they never, and they said, we understand. I have the emails. We understand why this bothers you, but we can't do anything about it. We just can't change it. And it sucked. And when I lost the job in March, it was because they were unhappy that I kept focusing on free agency and Bellator and things like that. When I lost my job in 2014, it was because I attended a Bellator media day, and I never asked for the job back. They just gave it back to me. I knew that in March it was the end. And then, when all this went down, I said, you know what? I'm not a good liar, and I don't want to lie to anyone anymore. And if they're going to think differently of me, so be it. But I'm going to tell everyone the story. I'm going to tell everyone what happened from day one, the issues that I've had with the UFC, the bullying, things like that. And this is a part of the story, and I'll have to face it. And at the end of the day, if this is my greatest crime against journalism, then, so be it. And as I've said to my colleagues, some of them come up to me and said that they were disappointed in me, I said, you have every right to feel that way. I always try to cover the sport as fairly and independently as possible. And, I'd love to see what's in your closet as well. I put it all out there. There's literally nothing left. And so I have to be at peace with that. And I will one day tell my children about this moral dilemma that I had. And I think we all cross them at times. And our sport is a unique one because it's not like I can go to TNT or ESPN or Fox or, there's just one outlet right now. There's just one TV home. And I had to wrestle with that. And, I have to forever live with that decision.
I appreciate you answering that. And there's a lot of tentacles there, and it's a long journalism discussion, and everyone has to make that individual decision. A lot of it, I think, will do with what your station is in life, whether you have children or not. Beyond all of that, Ariel, I do want to ask you about Fox, and now with some space between what happened and where you are now. How do you feel about an organization that, in theory, is supposed to be a news organization or an editorial organization that, at the behest of the UFC, got you removed? I mean, in theory, Fox is the rights holder. Fox should be the ones that should make decisions on the coverage of UFC. But it seems clearly in this case that they allowed a body to make that move. In the same way, there would be major uproar if we learned that the NFL decided that they wanted Al Michaels or Troy Aikman out of the booth because they were being critical of that body.
To be honest, it was really disappointing because I'm a big team guy, and sometimes it's a little hokey, but I really love the idea of a team. I played basketball my whole life, captain of the high school team, Maccabee team, basketball. I was a captain. I always loved the sort of rah-rah nature of sports. Big Knicks fan growing up. I loved how tight-knit that team was in the 90s. So I was always a big team guy, and I really kind of enjoyed being a part of a unit. And I always felt, unfortunately, like I was not a part of a team there, that for whatever reason, I wasn't viewed the same way as some of the other people there, and some of the athletes, to be more specifically, or some of the longer tenured Fox employees. And to be clear, when they didn't stick up for me, when I got a 2-minute phone call telling me that my services were no longer needed after 4.5 years, after I never missed an assignment, babies born, sick, never missed anything, I was hurt, and I also wasn't all that surprised because they didn't have my back for 4.5 years. Some ugly things happened during my tenure at Fox. Some things that they knew happened. Some things that, quite frankly, you would be appalled if I told you what happened. And every step of the way, I was ignored. I was told that from friends, from colleagues, that they're not allowed to talk to me about this, that they've been asked not to talk about it. And I took it. And, at some point, you're kind of a fool for continuing to take it. But again, goes back to my decision with the paychecks. This was the dream job. This was the only job. I had to do it. So think about how disappointing it is. Jewish kid from Montreal, moves to America, wants to be on television. I'm not trying to make myself into some sort of like martyr or some sort of victim, but this is what happened. This was the dream job, and it didn't go as I planned. And it was disappointing because I would always say, what if, your veteran broadcaster X was faced with this situation? Would you be acting the same way? Would you be remaining as silent? And, of course, there's no answer to that question, but it says a lot. It speaks volumes about what they think of you. And I don't think it was a performance thing. I just think that at the time I was kind of low on the totem pole. I was the new guy. I was maybe the internet guy. I was the under 30 guy, whatever the case may be. And the way that they treat the UFC is bizarre to me because it's sometimes like they treat the UFC like the UFC is paying them. Like, you're the ones cutting the checks. You can sometimes stick up for yourself. One thing I was always told was like, we're just soldiers in all of this. We got to do what they say. And that never really resonated with me. I will say this, though, that there were a lot of people who, would text me, and it was almost like, trying to hide, like, do they have your phones tapped? Like, why are you calling me from WhatsApp all of a sudden? You could, are they checking your phone records? What's going on here? There's that story of them thinking there was a mole and there was no mole. But a lot of them did go out of their way to reach out to me. And this is a bit of a tangent, but I met some really, really great people. And I hope that when anyone hears me talk about Fox, they don't think that I'm talking about, the producers, associate producers, people that worked with me and that helped me look as good as possible. And I actually talked to you today with a heavy heart. I don't know if you've seen, but one of those people, my stage manager for a long time backstage, a young man named Adam Geller, passed away. I found out late last night, and this is someone, just search for his name. You'll see people from Michelle Beadle to many veterans of the sport. He worked for Yes. He worked for CBS, MSG, Fox. A huge wrestling fan, a huge MMA fan, a father of one, passed away of colon cancer, and none of us knew. And this guy was by my side for many years. So working for Fox to me was not a bad experience because I met people like Adam. But it was disappointing in the end that they never stood up for me because I truly believe I did nothing wrong. I did everything that they asked. I had to, bend some of my own moral, judgments to take these jobs, and I did it, and I can only blame myself. But, in the end, how they kind of unceremoniously let me go for, never, never not doing anything wrong. They never told me that I couldn't talk about anything from my Vox Media job. Never anything like that came up. Was ultimately disappointing. The last silver lining that I'll mention in all of this was it was a massive blessing in disguise. I'm so much happier. I'm freer without having this burden on my shoulders. What they did for me, as far as like the way the fans view me now and how nice the fans have been towards me has been a great gift. But it also made me really appreciate who I've always, treated as my main job, and that's Vox Media and SB Nation. The day that I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but that podcast when I did the MMA Hour that day, when I got to the studio, Jim Bankoff, who's the CEO of Vox, who's a very important, powerful, and busy man, was sitting in my chair waiting for me, and he lives in D.C., and he came that morning to come talk to me, as was Lockhart Steele, who's the editorial director. And these people have always cared for me, have always had my back, and that means so much to me because of those reasons I just told you. So it just kind of reinforced how lucky I am to have this full-time job of covering MMA for Vox, because they're an outstanding company to work for.